Now in Toronto is Tasha Carradine, host of the Tasha Carradine Show. In New York tonight, we have Sean Speer. He's a senior fellow of fiscal policy, normally at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and former advisor to Stephen Harper. Also joining us in Ottawa tonight is Duff Conacher. He is the co-founder of Democracy Watch and the Democracy Education Network. Please join the conversation. Leave us your comments and questions on the CBC News Facebook page and YouTube channel, or tweet me at Carol McNeil. All right, Tash, I'll start with you tonight. Was this the right thing to do?
I think it's the right thing to do, not necessarily the right way to do it. Obviously, a lot of people are upset because campaigns have been underway in about 25 cases of candidates spending money, spending time. So, of course, those people and people in general who are involved in municipal politics say you just don't do this in the middle of a campaign. At the same time, I think there's a lot of merit in reducing the size of council. I don't know what the ideal number is, but you know, there are meetings that drag on for days and days on issues that could be resolved more quickly because all councillors usually have a right to speak. You also have situations where councillors horse trade. You know, I'll support this project in my ward, or your ward if you support this one in mine, and you get a lot of that kind of back and forth thing. And so I think that the sense is Toronto's become poorly governed, and this is an attempt to clean it up.
Okay, do you think this is, Sean, do you think that Toronto is poorly governed and that this will clean it up?
Well, there's so much to talk about here. There's strategy, there's tactics, and there's substance. On strategy, let me just say that I think that the level of ambition out of the Ford government is surprising many of us, and I think it's kind of exciting. We've seen major reforms in a whole range of areas as soon as they hit the ground here. On tactics, I agree with Tasha that the dropping this bomb days before the closure of the nomination date is bound to inflame debate and produce controversy and frankly, ultimately put the reforms at risk. And then there's the substance. Are these the right reforms? I agree with Tasha that the system is broken. And by the way, that's just not my opinion. That's the opinion of Mayor John Tory and many of others who've studied and looked at the functioning of City Council. It's up to Mr. Ford to argue that these reforms, reducing the size of council, is the right way to go about addressing the problems with the functioning of the City Council. There have been various reforms put out there, including by a task force on City Hall at the University of Toronto. My colleagues set out a series of procedural reforms to try to get at some of the issues that Tasha raised that don't involve amending the underlying statute here and reducing the size of the council. So the onus ultimately will be on Mayor Ford to make the case for why this is ultimately the right way to go.
He does like to be Mayor Ford almost here.
Pardon me, Premier Ford. Pardon me.
That's funny.
Okay, some councillors are characterizing Ford's work as an abuse of power and an attack on local democracy. Janet Davis, for example. Duff Conacher, what do you think?
I think it is. It's the move of a dictator. Voters were not consulted. No mention of it in the election platform. So to claim that you have some mandate to do this is essentially just a dishonest, false claim. And so it's a move that's made very badly and is changing local democracy, which without asking the people. And Doug Ford promised to govern for the people. You can't govern for the people if you don't ask them before deciding on a whim to do something.
All right, let's
also, there's no evidence that 25 people will make decisions more efficiently than 47 people. I mean, there is just no evidence. If they really wanted to get good governance in Toronto, and at the province, by the way, the Conservatives' platform would have included, first, an honesty in politics law, because dishonesty is a fundamental problem that undermines good decision-making, and also strengthen the ethics, transparency, and waste prevention and spending rules and enforcement. But none of that was in the Conservative platform, and it doesn't look like it's going to come at all. That's the way you actually drain a swamp and clean things up.
All right.
And Doug Ford's not promising that at all.
Let me go to Twitter. Matt on Twitter saying, drain the swamp, you could fire 50% of any government agency and the average person would never know the difference.
Carol, may I address that? May I address that comment?
Yes, please.
Because this is an interesting line of argument. In fact, I'd be interested to hear Tasha's views about this. Tasha and I both travel in conservative circles, as you know, and have a predisposition to smaller government. But even in my own mind, I'm grappling with the question whether I want fewer elected officials, which on the face of it, you might think Conservatives would be predisposed to. But if that means that we ultimately have greater power to unelected officials, fewer elected officials means means that bureaucrats are making more choices. I'm actually not sure whether that's in the interest of democracy and is even conservative.
That's an assumption. I think it's fair to assume, because one criticism I will say I don't think is fair is that these people can't serve their constituents, because MPPs serve the same number of constituents, MPs serve the same number of constituents. So the truth is, though, they will have bigger staffs. That is one thing I will not disagree with. Whether those staffs are political staff, so to speak, i.e. assistants to the councillors in their offices that are directly on the same page as them, or whether it's bureaucrats who are just on the same page there as the city in general.
Well, we don't know that.
We don't know. I know,
if
but
the staff is not doubled,
let me finish,
then services will be cut in half.
No, services will not be cut in half. Because
if the staff is not doubled, you will wait twice as long for help from your councillor if the staff is not doubled.
I think that right now the issue is that the city waits too long for councillors to make decisions. And to say this is undemocratic, it's not. The government was elected. They have the power within the Constitution to change the City of Toronto Act. Whether people like that or not is another issue. Mayor Tory wanted to put tolls on the gardener. He was told no by Kathleen Wynne. Did people scream that's undemocratic? No. They changed that law if you don't like it.
Yes, some people did because it was.
The tweet assumes that this will necessarily improve governance, and I think the onus is on Mr. Ford to make that case.
That is true.
If it ultimately rests greater power in the hands of unelected bureaucrats, I think we may be surprised with the outcomes that we get.
Okay, Toronto, Doug Ford comments on Twitter. I'm assuming it's not the Doug Ford. Toronto is bloated and can't make decisions either quickly or at all. Ford can't help the timing of elections. He is moving quickly to prevent more waste on election. Please comment and react to this opinion. Duff Conacher, you first this time.
There's just no evidence that 25 people will make decisions more quickly than 47 people. I'm sorry. They'll still have debates, and you'll have 25 voices, and they all speak. Okay, so it takes 47 people a bit longer to speak, but that doesn't mean that their points are any different, or that it will take any longer, or it's more efficient or effective to have half the number of people in the room.
It will take twice as long. You just do the
math.
No,
it will not take twice as long.
There was a council meeting recently.
Okay,
one at a time, because I can't make out what you're saying. Tasha?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what happens there, too. One of the councillors recently, Stephen Holiday, was on radio today saying that there's been a meeting going on for 6 days at City Council on issues he says could be resolved much quicker. You look at a lot of what the City Council talks about as well, the length of deputations, all these things can be changed, and yes, cutting it in half will cut the debate in half. It is a time issue, but the bigger question is, when these people do make their decisions, who are they? And that is really, I think, what this is all about. I think that the real reason this is happening is because there's a movement in Toronto supported by something called the Progress Party, which was started in April, which is helped also by people who are sympathetic to the NDP, to get people involved in municipal politics, which is their right to do. But Ford knows that there's going to probably be a very left-leaning council elected because they are organizing in a serious way for this election. He doesn't want to deal with that for 4 years, so he's preempting it by cutting the number of councillors in the wards that would be most likely to go to leftist or progressive candidates.
Duff, respond to that.
As I said, a dictatorial move by someone based on whim and private interest, not in the public interest.
Okay,
and a fundamental violation, I'm sorry, it is undemocratic. It's a fundamental violation of voter rights to do something that is not mentioned in your platform that is so significant.
But they do that all the time.
That is undemocratic by definition, unless you don't believe in voter rights to know what they're getting when what they vote
But he does have the right to do it, Duff.
He has the right to do it. That doesn't mean it's democratic. He doesn't have a mandate to do it at all, because he never mentioned it during the election campaign. And voters have a right to know what they're going to get when they vote. I'm sure many of the 40% who voted for him are also surprised by this.
I agree it would be better if he had mentioned it during the campaign.
So that's undemocratic.
No, let me finish. Then everything governments do, because governments do all sorts of things they promise to do and then don't do them. That's undemocratic.
That's right. That's true. It is. And two wrongs don't make a right, Tasha. No matter how right the politician is that does it.
I think you're abusing the term undemocratic and stretching it an excessively long way.
I'm not stretching it. It's voter rights.
Okay, let me go to...
Not stretch at all.
Okay, let me go to to the public. This isn't about saving money, Daniel G. comments on Twitter. This is revenge. Okay, we haven't heard from you in a while, Sean. What do you think?
Well, this is certainly something that Mr. Ford is going to have to address. What's the underlying case? I mean, as I said earlier, there is I think a general consensus that the functioning of Toronto City Council is in need of reform. The question is, are these the right reforms, and what's the underlying motivation? I looked before coming on the air at the press release that was put out by the government, and the truth is it's pretty weak, it's pretty limited. And so, yes, as I said earlier, there's a whole host. If the goal is to make City Council function better and to strengthen the hand of the mayor, and I think I'm afraid I don't know what my colleagues on the panel would say, but I'm predisposed to those kinds of arguments. The question is reducing the size of council the right way to go about it? My colleagues at the University of Toronto, who released a task force report last year, have set out a whole host of ways, ranging from a State of the Union type address by the mayor in which he or she sets out major priorities, greater regularity around the budgeting process, and so on. And so until Mr. Ford makes the case that this is the right way to go about it, he's naturally going to have to address questions about his underlying motivation and whether it's ultimately personal rather than substantive.
Yeah, a couple of questions about that on Facebook. People are tuning in to what you're all saying as well. Tracy Harris asks on Facebook, why does it matter if he reduces the amount of people on City Council? We've addressed that. Also, Proof on Twitter saying, how precisely is this saving the province money, and where does it say he can do that? I mean, we've also addressed that too. It is in the law, he can do it. But the question, Sharon Mead commenting on Facebook, it might be legal, but it certainly isn't moral. I'll go to Nicholas Dion asking on Facebook, so what recourse, if any, would the city or the feds have if they wanted to oppose this? Duff?
Well, John Tory has proposed a referendum, but for something to be on the ballot this election, it would have had to have been finalized by March 1st and approved by council to be put on the ballot. So unless the bill is amended as it goes through the Ontario legislature, making that possible and making a referendum possible, there will be no referendum before this is shoved down voters' throats.
Carol, may I just say that having spent time in government, I think we can count on the fact that Ontario public servants have scrutinized the bill closely and are satisfied that it would stand up to any legal challenge. Otherwise, we wouldn't have seen it
I would say
move as quickly as we have.
There's no legal basis to challenge it. And for the point that it's not moral, you know, I can understand why people will say that. I understand why people, especially if they're opposed to the idea of it, will say that, because there's a certain, I mean, yes, he should have probably said during the election campaign, I, you know, would like to do this. Other people, though, I've said, I was listening to talk radio earlier today calling in and saying, look, he promised to clean up government. That's enough for me. In fact, there was not a single caller who called in and said,
government. It doesn't clean up government.
Okay, can I finish? A lot of people, their perception is that it will, Duff, whether you agree or not. That's their perception, that he's doing what he said he was going to do, which is clean it up. So,
but here's the thing. I was just talking to Andrew Sancton, who's a professor of urban politics, who was part of the consultation group that said 25 is a good number, that they wanted to reduce city council. He doesn't like the way the province is going about this, but we were speculating about where the weakness and where the province's case is weak. And it might be around the idea of consultation. Was there a proper consultation done here? And perhaps the city might have a case there for an injunction.
No, I don't think so. The referendum to amalgamate the City of Toronto and that decision that was made with very little consultation, the judge who ruled on that case said, very bad decision-making, very undemocratic, but unfortunately legal.
Okay, so do you predict, all three of you, I assume, think that this is going to go forward? There's no way out.
Yes, but I would draw a distinction between a legal case and the political case. I suspect that this is going to cause a lot of political turbulence for the next several weeks and leading up until the next election. And as Tasha said at the outset, had the government handled it differently? Had they telegraphed this during the campaign? Or had they made the case, even within the past several weeks, of the nature of the problem and the extent to which these proposals specifically address those problems, they may have been able to nip some of those critiques in the butt. Because they haven't, I think this is going to consume a lot of political oxygen for this new government. between now and the middle of next fall, of the upcoming fall.
I think it's actually given oxygen. Jennifer Keesmaat's already thrown her hat in the ring. She was the former chief planner of the City of Toronto. I think that may not have happened at the 11th hour as it did if there was not a sense that Mayor Tory's been weakened by this, and that the entire City of Toronto, every progressive voter who's angry about this needs a champion for their views. And so I think that is going to maybe be the biggest kick to the Ford government. They may think they're getting what they want here, but they may not at the end of the day, depending how the result of this election goes. So stay tuned.
Yeah, we will. Tasha Keridan, host of the Tasha Keridan Show. Sean Speer, Senior Fellow of Fiscal Policy at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch and the Democracy Education Network. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.